Today's video, it's more of a talk, not a group discussion, but more things from my point of view and maybe interested to someone who is wanting to get into Arduinos, or as one person put it to me, black magic. I love that one. As you can see in front of me, and probably from the title, this is going to be about Arduino. Now there are two products that are commonly used, and that is the Raspberry Pi and the Arduino. So, what's the primary difference between these two devices that will determine on how much money you end up blowing? Well, look at it this way. This is basically an actual computer. You can install an operating system. You can, I mean, for crying out loud, they've even got Windows for it, which is just bleh. You can put any kind of software on here and you can get it to run. This, on the other hand, in general, it requires actual code to be loaded onto the chip, and then that's what runs. So if you want to add in networking, for instance, well, you've got to add in networking module. That's already built in. Well, modern ones have Wi-Fi, and because this is a Raspberry Pi 2, yeah, it only has like Ethernet. But you can plug a dongle in here and it just goes, oh, hello, and talks. Well, most of them. Now, both do have, well, these pins, and that allows you to then, on this, program it to do certain things. So say if a sensor is tripped, it can report back on here, it can send an email off, it could trigger something else to operate, or, you know, whatever. Arduinos, they can do the same thing, but they don't have all that junk. So, an example, if this thing shuts down, the operating system has to boot up, and then if it's been set up properly, then it can start loading up all the sensors and everything to work. Whereas with this one, it just snap. A few moments, it's back up and working. But downside is processing. This doesn't have as much processing power as this. I mean, this would basically just run it around the block like dozens of times, not even hundreds. Whereas this thing's a lot, yeah, not as powerful. Anyway, with that said, now that we're looking at the Arduino part, the question is, what kind of Arduino do you buy? And I just realized I forgot something. Okay, so let's get back to it. Arduinos. Which one do you buy? Well, the better question is, what do you want to do? So, my example, I would like to build an LED lamp. Now, I do intend to show everyone once I have a better sort of grasp of it, but for now, what Arduino do I use? I could turn around and I could have this Uno that I've had for, I bought this when they were still rather common, like this was the flagship model. And as I understand, this is what's referred to as a genuine Arduino. Oh crap, I totally forgot. I gotta go over this part first. So, winding back from that, let's talk about the genuine versus fakes. This isn't a straightforward thing. This isn't like, oh, you go buy an iPhone and it's, well, you can buy them new, you can buy them used. Or you can buy the really shitty knockoffs. No, it's not like that. This is what's referred to as open source, meaning other people can use the same stuff, but when, say, someone tries to clone this, and I mean clone by copying all the text, all the imagery, everything, to state that it's made in Italy, associated with Arduino.cc, that's a fake. And despite some of the mistakes I've made in the past, you don't, it's not recommended to buy those. Sometimes they'll sort of up the price to make it look, oh, well, you know, we're official, support us, but no, they're faking it. You can get around that by going to authorized suppliers, which you can find on the Arduino website, or just generally look around properly and use your head, which unfortunately a lot of people can't do properly these days. Anyway, another example. This is unbranded. It only states that it's a Nano version 3, but there is no markings to state that it's associated with anything, and it's very poorly made. Well, been cut out. I mean, this thing's probably going to be rock solid for a long time, but there's no way that that chip on here, which is an FTDI, and if you look up Dave Jones's video, which I'll try to remember to link in the description, there is a lot of BS that company pulled. It just makes you cringe. Anyway, this one, it's got built-in USB, which is really useful. This one doesn't. Now, this one's probably an excellent example of knockoffs. So while this isn't made by Arduino, it's made by another company called SparkFun, which make their own Arduinos, and they sell them. And they do it without having to worry about a lawsuit, because they make it clear, this is SparkFun. They put on Arduino CC, which, as I understand, isn't copyrighted, but goes, hey, you know, and you can buy this. Now, this requires its own programmer, where that chip programs this one, the Arduino. This one, you have to provide your own external one, so yeah, it really depends on your deployment. For me, it was just, oh, Arduino. I didn't realize I was buying these ones fake. Another one that I bought that was fake is this thing. Because I bought this off eBay cheap, and oh, this one doesn't actually have the SparkFun. Okay. Oh no, yes it is. It's got the SparkFun logo on there, so ripping them off. Now this Proto Snap, if you're looking at playing for a budget, I think this one was $15, but the price, I don't even know if they're selling these anymore. This has push button, light sensor, RGB LED, and a buzzer. So you can program this thing and everything as it is to play around and learn how to use this damn thing. I mean, even as it is, you could solder in, if you've got those skills, a couple of these headers, and you can start using this for other stuff, except for the ones that are already well utilized, where you can tell with the lines that say, hey, this here is connected to pin 4. It also helps you with programming when you're wanting to experiment. Now, this is a direct copy of SparkFun's, and it's actually a knockoff because it's got the SparkFun logo on there. But for me, this is a very useful thing, more than one of these. Now, this is great if you've got a shield, which is, oh God, I keep doing it. Sorry. Getting up hand. And this is another Arduino I have. Now this one, I didn't feel too rotten about buying it. And Arduino do sell one of these, I think. Wait, what do they call this thing? The names. No, that's the micro. Leonardo, sorry. The Arduino Leonardo. Now this one, it doesn't have a secondary chip for the, well, programming of it, because, well, this chip here is built in USB. This one doesn't, that's why it's got that. But you can see the difference between these two boards. There's no markings on this one. I mean, the coloring's the same almost. But, well, it's not saying, hey, I'm an official Leonardo. It's like, no, it's not even marked that. It's just, you have to tell by looking at it. And personally, I'm comfortable buying Arduinos like this. When I go out and buy a cheap one, that's what I look for. No official markings. Unless, of course, it's made by a third-party company, at which point, as long as it's legitimately made by them, that's fine. But another example of some of the atrocious stuff I've seen. And when I bought this, I was expecting just a knockoff when I bought this one. Now this is Arduino Micro that, or this is a different one. Anyway, this is the same as the Leonardo. It's just a breadboard instant of it. And I'll show you in a little bit what that specifically means, but this is a clear knockoff. They are attempting to make themselves look like, you know, an official product when it's not. And this is wrong. When I purchased this, as I recall, it wasn't displaying all these sort of logos going, ooh, official. It was just saying Arduino Micro with the particular chip on here. This thing works. I mean, you can plug it into the computer and it detects as the Arduino itself. You can program it, but this is a clear attempt at tricking people into buying a Arduino, which is just wrong. If it didn't have the Arduino Micro logo on here, if it just had Micro, and on the back here there was none of this text, not the Arduino or the Adafruit logo, I would have been fine with this. But unfortunately, companies in China or factories in China, they just don't understand. A legitimate person going out and purchasing one of these, I mean, I know that I'm going out and buying a cheap version of the board, one that's made in China. But the factory that manufactured this, or the people behind it, decided that they had to make it look like, you know, an official Arduino, and that is just wrong. Still, the purpose for me buying this one, I didn't end up using it for, which just drove me mental. So, enough with that said. When it comes to purchasing an Arduino itself, you got to decide what you want to do. And as I said before, my intention is to build an RGB lamp with an acrylic sheet. That's my end goal. So the question is, what Arduino do I use? Because that's what I want to use. Now, by all means, I could turn around and use a Raspberry Pi, but I don't have what I need. That's complete overkill. One of these is perfectly fine. I mean, I might even be able to get away with using an AT Tiny with Arduino code on it. You know, I shouldn't need all these pins. All I need is 2 buttons and a potentiometer, and that's it. No, sorry. Because it's RGB, I also need 3 digital outputs to control the RGB lights, 2 switches, and the pot, which is just... Anyway, I don't need a lot of processing power. I don't, for the life of me, need much I/O, which is these pins, these headers. So I don't need that much. So that alone would probably be too big. However, what you can do is you can actually buy the chips. And this is where Raspberry Pi and Arduino sort of separate. So this chip here is basically what makes the Raspberry Pi become a Raspberry Pi. The Arduino ones, it's the Atmel chip. Now there are sometimes other companies that have come along and produced boards, which I don't have here at the moment, doesn't matter. But there are other boards produced by other non-for-profit organizations or other groups that are making stuff like this, and they just simply code it to work on the Arduino library, which is great. Grows everything. It also saves them a lot of time with development. So now with Arduino, with Raspberry Pi, you can also get these tiny modules. So you can make it even smaller. I mean, that's great. That's if this is something that's going to be useful for you, but for me, it's not. It's just like an option. So let's say, for instance, I decided that I wanted to go with the Arduino Uno. Well, that's big. This is small, and this is even smaller. But what if I don't want all that? What if I just want the chip along with some other basic components, and that's it? Well, that's possible. This particular one has a DIP, which is this chip here, which does the Arduino stuff. This one has got a surface mount component, which is here. This one's difficult to take off and replace. That one just pops right out. So let's say this chip was to fry, it'd be a bit of work with some soldering equipment, and once I was able to acquire a replacement chip, which Atmel chips aren't really that difficult to get replacements of, pop it on there, reprogram it, it's back and working. That requires soldering. This one, you just have to pull out, put a new one in, and you're off. After you've, well, installed the bootloader, which is firmware, and not the part I'm going to be discussing today. The point I'm trying to make is that if you're actively wanting to develop a product where you want it outside, you can go with this, you can go with something like this, or you can go with something like this, or this, which not recommended unless of course you're doing soldering. But in my case scenario, I want to be very basic. Now, I made this years ago. So what that is my own Arduino. Is Arduino CC going to turn around and slam me for making it? No. No, they're not. Understand the organization, understand what they stand for, and understand what they're trying to accomplish, and you find out that this is perfectly acceptable. Now, let's say, instead, I wanted to go with one of these. Well, you just simply slot it in like so. And you can just simply run wires to wherever the component is. That's useful for this. So if you are someone who is apt to use like a shield like this, you can get plenty of others. These just simply slot on. A few others they can stack up. So you can add networking functionality, a screen, or push buttons, and just have a stack of these. But you got to also make sure they don't use the same pins, otherwise you'll have a bad day. Unless of course it's, what is it? There's a communication, there's like one or two communication protocols on this thing that allows you to hook up multiple devices. I can't see it. In fact, oh, here we go. SDA, SCL. So effectively you can have, so on these two pins you could have as many devices as you wanted, but each of the devices have to be configured, or each of the chips, to say, well, hey, I'm number one, I'm number two, I'm number three, I'm the master, I'm the slave, blah. Another thing you can get, something like this. This is a touch sensor, so it's like a button, except it uses your body to, well, help go, oh, hello, I've been touched. So touch sensor. So instead of having to solder that directly onto here, well, you just simply put one of these little headers on here, slot it in, wire it up, you're done. And then it's the coding part, which is a complete headache. So there are plenty of options. If you're someone who wants to more play around with random components, this is a very good idea. If you want to go with more the shield based stuff, well, you can just buy that and you're off. Yeah. Now, a new Arduino came out recently, which is the Nano Every. I don't know when this was released, but it's been around for a while, so you know, it's like, bleh. The reviews I came across this were quite interesting because apparently all the pins aren't available. So we're going to be diving into this subject next. But to finish off, this Arduino basically shows you what has to be connected. So ground, two positives. Over here you got one positive, one ground, which is just the 5 volts. The thing that really got me was this, which is the reset line. Now I forget what resistor this is, but effectively it has to be connected to active all the time, otherwise the chip just sort of freaks out. Another two things that are required is the capacitor and this. This basically helps the Arduino keep its time so it doesn't sort of start screwing up and going all over the place, which you don't want. But really, I mean, that's it. Other than putting in this switch, that's not necessary, that was my choice. These two LEDs were my choice. This one just runs off the power rail and lets you know that the board's powered when it works. And this one is just, well, this LED here, it just blinks. That's it. The sticker on here is something I found online. I printed it out, cut it out, and I can, well, just stick them on one of these chips. So really I could take this chip, put it in here, reprogram it, stick it back in here and do whatever. It's that simple. So if I get this out, I can happily move on to my next part. Oh, I forgot about that. Ooh, that's better. So, as I understand, this one is probably a bit controversial. After I purchased this one, I think it was a few months or a year later, where there was some thing about Arduino CC and Arduino.com or Arduino something. And some of these boards were being sold by a third-party company that, or third-party organization that wasn't officially, it was a headache. So I don't know if this is an official Arduino or if this is like a knockoff one from the, so it gave me a headache. Oh, if you're wondering what this thing is, I think it's an EEPROM. Basically, it's UV erasable memory. I still need to figure out how to use those. All right, now Arduino. So we can't use, let's try to compare these. So we got a 328P here, and we got a 32U, so that's not what we're looking for. 3 to 8. You should do it. So relatively, the chips are basically going to be identical. Where is it? Digital I/O. So the Nano's got more pins available than the Uno version 3, which is this. The voltage inputs are going to be a little different, which this one doesn't actually have. Uh-oh. Documentation on this thing sucks. This is what I pulled off their website. So effectively, these are both basically the same, other than its power supply. Yeah, it's just normal. Now this chip is available in this package for this particular board, so I don't know if this was a mistake or just a different model. But as you can see with the open tabs, I was a bit yeah, a bit crazed. So if I take these away and we go to here, where'd I get that from anyway? These are the schematics. Now these are free to get off the internet. I got these from the Arduino website itself. And because I'm using these as a show all and not, oh, this is how you copy them. These are free to get offline. They're not difficult to obtain. As you can see, there's a lot more to this schematic than there is to this schematic. And that's because this thing's literally just a small PCB, while this was a little brick with a whole bunch of other components. Not to mention this has 2 microcontrollers on it. And that's effectively what the Arduino is a microcontroller. So you have one that's got a USB interface, and you have another one, which, well, doesn't. It only runs on serial, so... So there's a 328P, so that's the main one, hence the headers here. And this one would be the serial interface, which is a 16U2. And this one, here we go, that's the FTDI chip. I'm so glad they stopped using this after the fiasco this company caused. It just, my jaw dropped. But, really, I mean, other than filtering the power properly, I mean, optional reset switch if absolutely necessary. It's probably necessary during development, but while it's running, I mean, power cycling the thing should solve it. The LED isn't exactly necessary. Yeah, to put something like this onto your own board, it doesn't really require that much. And especially with the Uno. I mean, a lot of this, if you're not connecting to USB, you don't need this whole part. You can just like pop that away. So really, it's just the reset line, the power lines, and the crystal crystal in the crystal oscillator is one thing, and a couple of capacitors. That's it. You know, hook up whatever you need, and you're done after you've supplied an appropriate amount of power. So they're not that difficult. Now the Leonardo, you know, this thing. I mean, same sort of board as the Uno, but there's a whole lot less to it, mainly because it's all done on the one chip. So it's far less complex. So I'm going to keep the Uno out, and I'm going to keep this one out. So yeah, these are the specifications. So this thing will take up to 20 volts. Its power supply has been designed to accept that, which is probably overkill. I mean, I'd stick with more like 12 volt power brick. Now the Arduino Zero is one I came across where they specifically stated that you could play MP3s directly on it. And this is where you sort of blur the line between Raspberry Pi and an Arduino because, well, you've got a ARM chip, which is what I think they use anyway. And the Arduino Zero itself, well, this one takes up a couple of pages because it is much more complex. So yeah, that's, does this thing have 2 USB ports? Yeah, I think it does. So this just takes the whole thing and blows it completely out of the water for complexity. But what else have we got on here? So the Arduino Every and the Arduino Nano Every and the Uno WiFi 2. So basically, I believe it's an upgrade version of this, which and these both use the same chip, 4809, 4809. Turns out this chip's also available in this sort of layout, which is really nice. And it made me wonder whether or not I should try to use this chip. But the limitations with this particular one. So that's the Every. And this is oh wow. Now I honestly was hoping to have this Arduino, the Uno Wi-Fi 2, but unfortunately I don't. So let's try to look at something a little bit more. Here we go. That'll do it. So this shows you chip. So here it is here. And on this one you can see that you've got these 3 pins here, one here, one here, one here, 2 here, 1 here. You've got a fair of them that are unpopulated. So you can't actually connect them unless of course you directly solder to them. So that would make this board, which I've got right here, not as complete as the upgrade version of this one, which if you look at here, same chip, but all the lines are basically connected to something. Whether it's the Wi-Fi module, which this has built in, which, yeah, I mean, that's actually fun. But not all the pins on this one are accessible. The other thing is, what I'd like to try to do is to take this actual chip, program it externally, and then see if I can use it in my RGB code. Why would I buy this one? It was basically $15. Free shipping, locally. As I understand, it's a legitimate Arduino, and I'll do the unboxing of it now. Should just better check that I'm still... Yeah, I'm halfway through. I'm already half an hour into this. I'm gonna hate myself when I'm doing the editing. So, ooh. So this is the Every. Now, you could buy a $20 version of this, but I honestly decided not to. Oh, wow. Now, my question is, what on earth are those two chips for? This also doesn't have the Wi-Fi module, so it's going to be a lot cheaper. But I believe that's serial to USB, and I believe that's the power. Although I could be mistaken. And this, being where I purchased it from, is well, pretty damn sure it's a legitimate one. Now, a comment made on another YouTuber, well, by another YouTuber, stated that, well, see this information here? It's on the bottom. And when you have this placed in a breadboard, which is where the typical application would be, or in a PCB, you can't see that. Now on this one, it was done properly where those details are on the top, but no, on this one, they're on the bottom. And for a company like this to do that, or a group like this, just, you know, why? Why is that? Honestly, this should have come in a PCB. I mean, the foam's going to help, but those header pins sort of floating around could do some damage. So this is going to be like the thank you for buying, you know, buying official. And the stickers I still, anyway. Yeah, so if you're buying this to be able to access everything, you're not going to get it. And it's clearly shown here, and they're not hiding it. Like I said, you literally just download this off their website. From the product page about this, they have officially. It's not hidden. So if you are buying this to specifically just sort of muck around with, perfect idea. Honestly. This one though, if you're doing more sort of active developing, you probably want to go with this. I mean, then you could turn around and you buy, like, if you wanted to do like legitimately and try to sell it on that. I mean, like I said, $15 Australian, and I bought one of these. You'd have to sell your product for a lot more than that. The time for manufacturing, the profit that you need to make in order to continue with what you're doing. And then there's like accounting, shipping, it just sort of blows completely out. So then people start complaining. I am completely going off the rails with that. But yeah, the Arduino Micro, which I believe that's this one here. Is it? You can see this one is actually a lot older. This is a 32. Yeah, this has got a 32 on it. Now, this chip is an upgrade from this board here. So this is a 16, and this is a 32 version. So really, that itself could be an Arduino. And right here in the schematics. But as you can see, with this particular chip, like, these LEDs aren't absolutely necessary. They just like blink to say when stuff's going on. You got your external crystal, you got a few other sort of basic components on here. But really, I mean, apart from the crystal, I mean, the diode, I'm not exactly sure if that's necessary, but you know, as long as you can supply generally with stable power and put in some proper protection because you don't want to blow it up on an accidental trip. Yeah, this is what are those pins for? Yeah, that these don't require much in development. You know, once you're in the manufacturing process, development is where you usually blow a couple of these chips up, so be ready for that. But yeah, just sort of try to all right, so we've gone through a couple of these schematics. The Arduino Uno WiFi 2. Where is it? So this would help someone who's doing developing. So that's going to be the, oh, hello. So here's the Arduino Micro. 32U4RC, which we can probably ignore because that's meh. 32U4. So yeah, the microcontroller on this is being used on the Uno WiFi 2 as a serial to USB interface. That means this thing has two Arduinos on it. Two microcontrollers on it. Where's the Wi-Fi module? Nano Every. What's this? Alright, so that's the Wi-Fi 2. I have no idea what that is. But that's... No, that's something else. Anyway, I don't know. What are you? 2-bit level shifter. Oh, so this would go from 5 volts to 3.3 and vice versa. Which you don't want to put in 5 volts on a 3.3 rail. You'll generally damage the chip. This is the Wi-Fi module. This is useful if you're programming it from like scratch. Where's the pins? Oh, so SDA, SCL. So this is working on that thing where you can stack multiple of these chips up. So you could have like 4 or 5 different Wi-Fi chips if you want it for some psychotic reason. Although there can be some legitimate reasons for doing that on just the one Arduino. And yeah, this can, you can have like as many as you want. You can also hook up other devices that run on this sort of channel. And you just say, hey, blah, blah, blah. Hey, you know, I want to communicate device number 13 or... So yeah, that's the built-in Wi-Fi. And that itself is probably going to be useful for some... It has GPIO pins, so you could program this like an Arduino as well. There we go, main schematic. So yeah, let's see, what do we got? Now this is the Uno Wi-Fi 2. Where's the main SOC? Where's the main chip? Oh yes, you got 3.3 domain, you got your 5 volt domain. Wow, this board is getting a little bit more complicated than I was expecting. Wow. Wow. Oh, it's going to be fun when it comes out. But anyway, going back to it. These two boards fall down to the same sort of thing. If you only want to tinker and have a bit of a play around with, you know, mess with some code, this one's perfectly fine. You just plug it onto a breadboard, hook up some components, and you know, have your fun. Or you want to stack a shield, same sort of thing with this. You buy this one instead, which this one was $50, so that was a bit more expensive, and that's the cheapest I could find it from a legitimate supplier with free shipping. Although I forget if that was including or excluding GST. Wait, no, I spent $57 on it. Yeah, trust me, I'm regretting that at the moment for doing that, so. So, you know, this is just really complicated. And this really is. This is useful if you want to have Wi-Fi projects without screwing around too much because it's built in. But if you don't, you want to do basics, that's perfectly fine. If you want to do basics, that's perfectly fine. This is probably a little bit better, depending if you want to constantly keep plugging in a programmer for it. And you're mucking around. This board, if you're wondering, it's used to drive stepper motors. So it's like motors that you can, well, spin to a certain point. Like rotate once completely around, or do a full rotation. Do a part rotation, quarter rotation, third rotation. And that's what that's for. Really, this video was to try to fall out, and I just sort of completely blew it, so. Paperwork, and that's a complete waste. And I got that cleared, and I've gone way over half an hour on this, so this video is going to get cut up severely. For So going back to my whole RGB lamp thing, this board, if I had more money to spend, because it's like 15 bucks, definitely be worth it. I mean, I wouldn't have to worry too much about power. It's just as long as the chips is easy to program as well. That's it. Now this one I've had some experience with, as you can see well here by me programming or setting up my own like Arduino. Now to be very clear, the reason why I use this power supply and not some of the more simpler ones is I found this thing can take getting shorted out quite well. It seems to really handle it quite well when it gets shorted out. I have blown up one of these voltage regulators, but yeah, I haven't physically killed one of these boards to the point where it's fried. Whereas some of the more simpler ones, I've seen one with a fuse, and I don't recommend using that because when I did sort of screw things up, it just killed everything. And I was pissed. All right. So the whole thing about being able to slot in and power your Arduino from like this, yeah, that's useful. That's great. I mean, I absolutely love it. I'd want to keep using something like this, especially when working with breadboards. This was more built as a moment, a holy moment. I did that terribly. The major difference between these two is that this one doesn't have a crystal oscillator and this one does. For you, probably not going to mean too much, but if you're going to have this thing like running 24/7, 7 days a week, or in an industrial application, you actually do want to stick a crystal on here. It's going to cost you a little bit extra, but stability helps. Although you probably won't notice, and I'm just sort of talking from other points I've seen online. But yeah, if you're trying to decide what you're wanting to do, well, try to plan how you want to play around. Do you want to turn around and just stack shields all day? Or do you want to have something you can plug into a breadboard and then attach another breadboard and another breadboard? You know, make it like this. So yeah, I could wire up to whatever I plug in here, or it'd be this chip, and start probing different addresses to see what's written on it. Unless of course the UV light's already sort of dissipated whatever was stored on here. Or is that actually a microcontroller? I forget. Anyway. Yeah, I mean, you can take one of these, just instead of have it slotted in here, and just wire up. This could be something more adventurous you can tinker with. Anyway, your final option, and honestly, if you really just want to play with a bunch of basic settings, a bunch of basic components, this is probably your best bet. I don't know if you can still buy these, unfortunately, but this already has a bunch of components on there you can muck around with. And once you feel you're up to it, you can just literally snap it off. And I'm not going to do this because I actually want to keep this as it is. Yeah, you can snap these off and use them in your own project, or use your Arduino for something else. Anyway, that was my rambling, ranting and going off the rails a bit. So, yibbity yibbida.